Hey guys, this is Wes with Dirt Concepts. Today we're going to cover nitro engine maintenance to improve your reliability and maximize your performance on the racetrack. Let's get started. With nitro RC racing, maintenance is absolutely critical to your success on the racetrack and overall just having a good time when you're at the racetrack. So some of the things we're going to cover today is we're going to take a look at the fuel system and maintaining good fuel pressure. We're going to take a look at the engine clutch and some of the telltale signs that your clutch may have issues, as well as some of the typical maintenance that you'll perform between track days. We'll take a look at the nitro engine, and in this case I'm actually prepping this engine for an upcoming big race, so I am going to do a full teardown on it. It has been a couple months since I've fully teared it down, so I think it's probably about time to check the bearings and among some other stuff. So anyway, follow along with me, and yeah, let's get started. All right, first things first, we're going to pull the body off of the buggy. Go ahead and do that. And then what I'm going to do is cap the exhaust again. It's always best just to keep all the holes plugged in the engine if possible, to kind of keep that humidity and moisture out of the engine. Since we do run nitromethane and a alcohol mixture, it does attract moisture. The next thing I'm going to do before I start at all, I'm going to go ahead and use compressed air with the air compressor on my buggy to try to get off as much of that loose dirt and dust as I can. You know, obviously you don't want any of that to get in the engine, so removing as much of that dirt and dust is pretty crucial before you crack this thing open. So, all right, next step is we're going to go ahead and pull the engine as well as the tuned pipe, the air filter, and the fuel tank out of the buggy. All right, I've got the buggy separated from the engine, the fuel tank, as well as the tuned pipe and header. So next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and remove the fuel lines from the fuel inlet on the carburetor, as well as the tuned pipe. And then what I will then do is take a few of my caps that I have here. So make sure that you have separate caps that are in a clean location, especially before you put them on the fuel line nipple on the carburetor, which I'm going to do here before I do any maintenance. And then I'll go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and actually remove these fuel lines off of my tank. I'm going to go ahead and cap those two while I'm at it. There we go. Now we don't have to worry about any dirt getting in the fuel tank or in the carb. All right, next thing I'm going to do is take the air filter off as well as the tuned pipe. All right, now that I have the engine, where it's just the bare engine at this point, I'm going to go ahead and use a large dust cap that you can get from ProTek. And I'm going to go ahead and just put one over the exhaust and one over the carb inlet. Something else I like to do is leave a throttle band on the slide. That way it just kind of stays closed while you're working on it. So you don't have to, it's optional, it's just something I like to do. So one of the things that you want to check as soon as you get your engine apart and capped, you can check your clutch. So one of the things I like to do is I'll just go and spin it, and you can listen to it, and it shouldn't really make any noise. If you hear any kind of either like a crunching noise, obviously not good. You can rock it back and forth, you can check that and see if a cage broke inside of a bearing, but usually you can just hear it because it'll make kind of a whirring noise. So that's how you know that most likely you got a bad clutch bearing, which is not uncommon. I think it's best, since you're only $1 per bearing and uses 2 bearings, just replace them every race day, and then it's a lot cheaper than the consequence. If you do destroy a bearing, it could potentially end up destroying the expensive clutch belt and then eventually your spur gear, which is also expensive. So, all right, so next thing I'm going to do is pull off the clutch and take that apart. So something I want to note really quick, if you're removing the flywheel from your engine, please use a flywheel removal tool. So don't try to pry on it. It's not good for the crankshaft, or the bearings really. So these are precision made high performance engines, so we got to treat as such, use the correct tools. So put your flywheel removal tool on, Get it there on the tip, and then it won't take much. It'll just pop loose just like that. Comes right off. So there's my flywheel. All right, now that I have really the engine stripped down to the bare engine at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and inspect it real quick before I clean it any further. So I can tell you right now that I most likely have a bad front bearing. The telltale sign of a bad engine bearing is you'll hear kind of a sewing machine sound. And then sometimes when you pull apart, if they're really bad, you can actually feel them by moving the crank. But usually with the front bearings, the telltale sign is really just seepage. So you can see that it's really dirty there on the bearing seal. It has a lot of dirt and everything there, and you can see where it was leaking down to the bottom of the engine. So that was probably fuel, and I'm guessing that that seal is going bad on the front of the bearing, which is not surprising. I actually have a lot of fuel through these bearings, so they're probably due for a replacement. So what we're going to do is go ahead and clean this thing up, and then we're going to put new engine bearings in it. So I do want to note that if you're going to do engine bearings, it is highly not recommended to do this outside at the track. Really, ideally, I don't like to crack open my engines at the track personally. I like to do that at home, and then what I'll do is just bring a spare engine with me that I can easily swap in. It's just not worth it, you know, destroying an engine, getting dirt or dust in there. If you do absolutely have to do it at the track, I would do it in a clean location like a race trailer, for example, where the door can be closed. And also you have a like a window unit, AC unit that can remove some of the humidity in there. So it's not just about the dirt and dust, but also the humidity getting into there inside the engine. So anyway, before we get started, what we're going to do is I have a clean workspace. If your workspace isn't clean, that's the first thing you need to do is make sure it's really clean. And then go ahead and get your shop towels. If you have the blue ones, that's ideal. And put those down so you have a clean spot to disassemble your engine. And then, yeah, so now we're just going to go ahead and wipe this thing down really good with a microfiber towel. And then any other residue dirt left, I'm going to try to clean off really good with my ProTek brush. And yeah, let's get going. So I have the engine cleaned up now. So one of the things you also want to look for is a bad exhaust seal. So it's kind of hard to tell with these black crankcase engines, like a lot of the OS-based engines, and the same with the ProTek RM engines. But what you can do is check for residue. So if you have any like residue, usually where I see it most of the time is actually on the bottom side of the exhaust gasket onto the back plate of the engine. So you can just look for residue, or just take a you can take a clean paper towel and wipe it on there and see if you get any black residue after you clean it off. So that means there's probably oil there, which means it probably seeped through the exhaust seal and you need a new exhaust seal. That's important because if you have a bad exhaust seal, it means it could suck dirt in there potentially, which is not good. So it looks like this one's probably okay, but since this is probably the biggest race I'll attend all year, I'm gonna go ahead and just replace it for extra insurance. So we'll do that last. So I guess now the next step is let's go ahead and pull the head off the engine. All right, the cooling head is off of the engine, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull the head button off. And before you do, really before you remove the cooling head, remove the glow plug. It's just easier to get it out now. I'll carefully remove the head button. And as I'm doing this, I'm setting everything in an organized manner, and just make sure your work area stays really clean while you're doing this, including your hands, which my hands are dirty, so I'm gonna go wash my hands real quick and come back to. All right, got everything clean here, including my hands. So what I'm gonna do is remove the head shim. In this case, it only has one head shim as well as the head button O-ring. So I'll go ahead and pull off the dust cap on the back of the engine, as well as the exhaust gasket. Next thing I'm going to do is remove the carburetor. Use a 2.0 millimeter wrench and just pull that out. There we go. Boom. All right, so I'll go ahead and pull this out. All right, pull this carb off. There you go. Set the carb down. And then at this point, then we have the engine pretty much ready to pull the sleeve and the rod and the crank out. So the next step here is remove the internals from the Nitro engine. So to do that, what I'm going to do is take a extra clutch nut, or the one you took off, and stick that on the crankshaft, thread it all the way down. Get your glow plug wrench, and then get a zip tie. I usually like to use a little bit bigger one than this one, but I know it's going to come out with the small one, so we'll be okay. And then you just take your wrench like that, pull that out, and then if you can't get this out with just your fingernails and hands, then what you can do is take two tuning screwdrivers, not one, and try to carefully pull it up from both sides at the same time evenly. What you don't want to do is accidentally warp or bend or deform anything, you know, like the sleeve, for example, or anything in the crankcase, damage it doing this. So you just want to be really careful pulling this out. This is where you make all your power. Well, not all of it, but a lot of your power is from this sleeve. So take your sleeve, put it down, and don't try to turn the engine over at this point. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and remove my back plate on my engine. Before you do any of this, you want to make sure that your engine is not at bottom dead center. Ideally as close to the top dead center as you can get. I understand with newer engines that's not going to be possible. And ideally even, I actually like to remove I have my engine at top dead center. I'm going to carefully slide my back plate off, and when you look at your back plate, you immediately want to look for any signs of rust on the back plate. So you can see here, it looks really good. There's no rust on there. So one thing you can do to check it is take a clean paper towel, and I've used WD-40 on it before because it's good at taking away rust. If you have any just like minor flashing surface rust on there. So you want to get that off because it gets in your engine, it's microscopic and actually eat up your engine bearings. All right, back plate's off. Now what we're going to do is, my engine's at top dead center, as you can see, and I'm just going to carefully just hold the crank and then carefully try to remove the piston from the engine. So it's removed. Now at this point, I got to get my clutch nut off. It was just barely on there. And then we'll go ahead and remove the crank very carefully. You don't want to damage anything. Take your time, be careful, check everything twice. All right, so now we have the engine completely disassembled. We're going to go ahead and remove the engine bearings. So when you remove engine bearings, you always remove the rear bearing first. At least I like to. And what I'm going to do is thread it up. So how these things work are, this is from Hootie. There's a few different manufacturers. I think Hootie makes the best one. You're basically going to use this inside tool right here that grabs onto the inside race of the bearing, clamps onto it, and then you just extract it out backwards. Again, make sure all your tools are nice and clean before you start. Thread it in till it beds, and you know when it's bedded. At that point then, whoop. All right, here it goes. It's kind of a little tricky to get them, but we got it out. All right, there's our engine bearing. So we'll set that down, and then we'll remove the front bearing. So to remove my front bearing, I use the other tool that comes in the Hootie toolkit, and I will put that in there with the spacer that comes in the kit. And then you have the another piece of CNC aluminum, milled aluminum that goes over the top, and this actually catches the front bearing as it's pushed out by the threaded rod and the spacer that's inside of the crankcase. So I put this down, there it's tight, and then I will just, there it goes, it's going. If you don't have these tools, I'm sure somebody else at the track might have them, or either will even do the bearing replacement for you, or you can actually send your engine into Adam Drake and he will do the service for you as well. And they do a great job. I've sent my engines up there quite a few times, so been really happy with it. So we have our bare crankcase at this point. All right, so now that I have my bare crankcase apart, what I'm going to do is inspect for any dirt in the engine. So what I'll do is just get my pit light and I'm going to look at it carefully and look for any specks in there or discoloration. If I see any discoloration, then what I like to do is just use a little Q-tip and wipe that on the inside of the crankcase, and you can usually see if you have anything to worry about in there, if the engine needs to be completely cleaned out or not. In this case, I can already tell you that there's a few specks of dirt in there, which is concerning. So I'm going to go ahead and clean out this crankcase before I reassemble. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is take a clean paper towel. I like to use the loose shop towels, as I said, but I don't have any. I'm going to go ahead and just wipe out all this excess oil in here and see if I can get any dirt with it. Yeah, and just confirm what I was thinking. So I see a little bit of something going on there. It's not much, but it's enough to be concerning, especially if I'm going to run them potentially along Maine if my race day goes good at the big race. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this out really good. Looks good. Get the other side. And what I like to do, if this thing's really nasty inside, I'll actually take spray away glass cleaner, and when the engine's completely disassembled, now wipe down everything first very carefully, clean towel each time before I wipe something down. And I'll actually soak everything in this spray away glass cleaner, and then I'll use compressed air to blow that off, and I'll do that multiple times until I feel like the part is completely clean of any type of microscopic particles of dirt that might have gotten in the engine. And this one, it's such a small amount that I think we're okay, and I don't need to do it this time. So anyway, so I'm going to keep cleaning this up. So I like to use a cotton swab Q-tip to check the places that the dirt usually accumulates inside of the crankcase. So one of the major spots, at least that I've seen it accumulate, is on these 3-port engines, is going to be right there on the the intake port of the engine, the inside. You'll see where it's black, it's not milled, you can see the casting marks there. So what I'll do is take my Q-tip and I'll just put it down there and wipe it around. And that is where it collects most of the time. So there's just a microscopic amount in there, which, as I said, there's no reason to go to the full rigmarole of cleaning this thing out. If you do get a lot, what I do recommend is cleaning all the oil off this thing really well. Q-tip it, clean as well as you can by hand, and then go back and do the spray away glass cleaner method with the compressed air. You want to make sure everything's very, very dry though before you start reassembling after that. So I'm wiping around, so I'm still getting some dirt. So keep doing this until your Q-tip ends up clean, and just try to get it in all the little nooks and crannies. The engine, it does like to collect though, I would say, in the non-machine parts for the most part. So at least that's where I've seen it. So yeah, that's not surprising to see some there around the carburetor. So I'm going to get this thing cleaned out the rest of the way, and then we'll get on to the next step. All right, crankcase is prepped, and I would say that it's cleaned up at this point, or at least what I think is acceptable. And I'm going to go ahead and set this to the side while I work on the other parts of the engine. So next thing we do is take my carb, and I have another clean paper towel. I'm just going to go ahead and wipe off the carb neck and just wipe off the carb in general. Any dirt, just make sure that you're very careful with the bottom opening here. Leave it face down and try not to get anything inside of there. Keep the slide closed. Make sure that your fuel inlet nipple is capped, as well as the top of the carb while you're doing this. And just be careful while you do it. You want to make sure you don't damage that carburetor O-ring, and while you have it apart, go ahead and pull it off and inspect it for any tears, anything like that. You know, the number one enemy of these nitro engines is an air leak or a fuel leak. So they are a pressurized, sealed fuel system, and they honestly, they just don't run right. They're not designed to run with any kind of leak in the system. They run their best when everything is sealed up tight. So carburetor is ready to go. As I said, I'm going to go ahead and replace my exhaust gasket, so I'm going to set that to the side. I'm going to go get a new paper towel here, and I'm going to go ahead and wipe down. Well, first I'm going to do the inside of the sleeve. Just this you have to be extremely careful with because you don't want to scratch the inside of the sleeve. So I don't want to wad this up too tight, just real light, just enough to check and see if there's anything in there, and there's no dirt or anything, so I think we're good. That was just a check. I wasn't trying to necessarily clean it. So the sleeve is good now. So now what I'm going to do is get my back plate going, which I've already cleaned the outside of it. So now I'm just going to wipe off the black plate well and look for any type of rust on there, which I said before, this one looks good. There's no rust on it, so we're good to go. Your head button, I'm going to wipe that off really well. And then just ensure that there's no grossness on there. Everything looks nice and good and clean. Set that aside. And then, okay. So for the piston is another one here. I'm going to use another fresh paper towel for that. Why am I using paper towels over microfibers? Microfibers can shed, and you don't want any kind of fibers getting, obviously inside of a mechanical engine. So we use paper towels instead. And plus, there's no dirt particles that can get trapped in the fibers either. They're brand new, so they're fresh. So I'm gonna go ahead and wipe off the piston just very carefully. You don't want to press too hard. Really, like I said, the main goal of this is you're just looking for dirt and deciding if each of that part needs further cleaning or not. So in this case, I have a little bit of, this is not dirt, it's just some carbon that came off it. So overall, I would say that this looks really good. There's no nicks on my piston, so I'm looking at the piston for any scratches, nicks, anything that looks like a defect, that would say that I probably have an issue and I, may need a new piston or it needs to go to the engine doctor. All right, so everything else is wiped down except for the crank. Let's get the crank wiped down. So another place that I see dirt collect a lot of times in these engines is going to be inside of the crank. So that's what I'm going to do. So first I wiped off the outside, and then I'm going to take a clean Q-tip and just on the inside of here, and you can see if you got anything going on, which in this case it is clean. So I know I don't have any dirt there. So I'm going to go ahead and set that down, put that away. So now I'm just going to go ahead and wipe off my engine bearings, and we're going to check those next. All right, engine bearings. How do you know if your engine bearings are bad? I talked about the front bearing. We know the front bearing is most likely bad in this, so I'll just go ahead and confirm it. I'll rock it back and forth a little bit. It feels like it's tight. I'll roll it. And, honestly, this feels really good to me. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and I might keep it and have a friend look at this one if I can keep and reuse this at another time, but I'm going to go ahead and replace it now because I said there's a big race coming up. So the rear bearing is definitely trashed. So how do I tell? Well, I can just roll it and I can feel it's a little crunchy, but also it's got a little movement in there. And if I move it to one side just a little bit and roll it, I can feel it's really crunchy. So that is definitely a bad engine bearing. This one's, I would say, ready for the trash can. So this is a ceramic rear bearing. So I like to run the ceramic in the rear and then a steel in the front. Reason for that is these are just less prone to rusting if they're ceramic in the rear. They're not as durable, obviously, as like a steel bearing, but if you take care of them, they'll last a long time. And they'll actually last a lot longer than the steel bearings. So let's just talk real quick about engine bearings. So I always recommend to use the OEM brand of engine bearings. And there's just a lot of off-brands that are a little bit cheaper, yes, but the longevity and performance of the bearing is just not going to be as good as like an OEM bearing. So keep that in mind when you're doing engine bearings. It's just something that I wouldn't skimp on personally. So up to you, but my recommendation is get the OEM stuff. All right, the engine's all cleaned up. So what I'm going to do is just start reassembling it. So first thing, I'll take my O-ring and I will carefully put that on my carb neck or inlet neck. And then I will take my O-ring for my head button and stick that on. And I'll also take my head shim, or my button head shim, and I'll put that on. At this point now, what I'm going to do is I like to use, so you can use like 5W30, for example. I've seen guys use that. I actually like to use after-run oil just for lubricating everything before I put it back in. It doesn't take a ton. The whole idea is, though, you just want to prevent rust on the inside of the engine, as well as give it an initial oiling point before you, on your first fire up of your Nitro engine after you rebuild it. So it is important, though, that you get the any of the bearing surfaces as well as the sleeve lubricated really well. So what I'll do is take a couple drops, stick it in there, in each bearing, like maybe 2 or 3 drops, and just spin it so you coat the inside really well. Boom. All right, those are lubricated. And then I will take my piston, and it's important that you get the wrist pin of the piston lubricated. So I do the holes, and then inside here on the wrist pin, as well as the bearing surface on the connecting rod. You want to get that nice and lubricated. And then I also like just to get the outside of the piston, because that'll be inside of the sleeve. And I'll just use my hands and just kind of wipe it on there evenly. If you get any extra, you can wipe it off on a clean paper towel. You'll do the back plate. And so with the back plate, it's actually most important that you get the steel coated evenly, the steel insert here on the back plate, as well as the O-ring. That's what you're looking to lubricate. And again, it doesn't have to be a thick layer, because you can cause some hydrolock in your engine. So you just want a real thin layer to provide some lubrication. The crankshaft will need it as well. So we'll put some oil wherever the bearing touch points are. So where the connecting rod connects, as well as the front and the rear bearing. So I'll go ahead and coat those 2 or 3 locations really well on the connecting rod, or sorry, on the crankshaft. And then on the sleeve itself, I do the inside and the outside, but just a really, really thin layer. Just thin. You don't need much. The idea is protection and just to lubricate enough for that initial startup. But again, you don't want to hydrolock it. That's not the goal here. You can use your finger. Just be really careful. You don't want anything really that could scratch the inside of that sleeve. Okay, so all the components are lubricated now. So I'm actually going to do the engine as well. So what I'm going to lubricate is really any of the points that I'm inserting something in the engine. So that'll be where the sleeve goes in here on the top. Just use my finger, kind of wipe it around in there where the sleeve will insert down in there in the crankcase. You'll do that each of your bearing points. Just 1 drop, half a drop is really all you need, not much. So the front and rear bearing points will get lubricated. And then at this point, I would say that you probably also need to get where the, there's a channel valley there in the bottom of your crankcase that you want to lubricate the inside of that. All right, before I finish reassembling this engine, one thing I want to call out here is a lot of times what I will do if I feel like I'm having leaking from my carb neck and I feel like the O-ring looks like it's in good condition, what I'll actually do is take some RVT sealant, black sealant, and I can put the part number for that in the description of the video. I use that. I put a very extremely thin layer around the carburetor where it meets up to the block, and it just provides some extra sealant there. That way I have no air leaks inside of the engine. Another thing I like to do with the carburetors is I take a small zip tie and I will wrap that around the boot that goes around the slide, and that just makes sure that no dirt gets into the backside of the slide boot. All right, the engine's fully assembled. So you notice that I used the electric screwdriver. I had my clutch on the lightest setting, which is very, very light. I always finish tightening things down by hand, as well as I get them either started with the wrench or started by hand before I use the electric screwdriver on it, so I don't cross thread anything. So something to keep in mind, make sure you're paying attention to doing that. I usually just recommend doing it by hand all the way for anybody that doesn't have a feel for their electric screwdriver, just so you don't make a major expensive mistake. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and torque down all the screws, as well as we're gonna install the new exhaust gasket and glow plug. And then we're gonna set this engine aside and start working on the fuel tank, the clutch, as well as the tune pipe. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and torque down all my screws. So when you're doing this, you wanna make sure you do it in a cross pattern and maybe just a little bit more at a time. You obviously don't wanna break the screw, so you don't have to give it a ton, but if you look on the internet, I believe Adam Drake may have recommended torque specs for OS-based engines. So you might want to check his channel. I'm sure he's got something on there. There's a lot of good tutorials on there, actually. So got the head tightened down. I'll do the back plate. Back plate doesn't need to be torqued as much because these are just the 2mm head screws instead of the 2.5s. Again, cross pattern and do 2 passes just to make sure as you clamp it down. Maybe the first one got loose on you. It doesn't have to be super tight, but snug. Now, the carburetor clamp, this one, you just want to be very careful with it. If you follow the instructions, basically as soon as you start feeling some good resistance, I have a pretty good feel for it. And then I know that it's tight enough, because if you over tighten it, it can actually deform I think it's called like a thermal coupler, maybe. Somebody can correct me in the comments. It's basically that thermal plastic coating that goes around the carb neck. It can get deformed. So you want to be careful doing that. Don't over tighten it. So at this point, the engine is ready to rip. So we're going to go ahead and we'll put the clutch on this, and then we'll set aside. All right, so now we're ready to assemble the clutch. So I have a brand new ProTek 4-shoe clutch here, and the configuration that I like to run is 2 composite shoes and 2 aluminum shoes, which actually come in the box when you order this clutch. It comes with basically the shoes, comes with the clutch springs, as well as the pins for the flywheel. It comes with a collet, some shims, a screw for obviously installing the bell. You have your clutch nut, and then you'll have to provide your own bearings, and as well as you have to buy your own clutch bell. I just buy the ProTek 13-tooth clutch bell, and it's vented, as you can see, and it's heavy duty. So if you're reusing a clutch bell, what I like to do is I take a green Scotch-Brite and I try to basically score the inside of the clutch bell, and it basically just provides like a fresh surface for rebedding in the clutch shoes. In this case, it's brand new, so I'm not going to do that. If you do that though, you want to make sure you clean this really good with brake clean before assembly. I actually already just did that off camera. I cleaned this with brake clean. So you want to make sure that all these clutch components have no oil residue on them before you assemble. As far as the clutch springs I like to use, I like the 1.0 springs on my aluminum shoes, and then I run the 0.95 springs, which do not actually come in the ProTek clutch kit. You have to buy these separate. I use those on the composite shoes. One of the things you want to look at if you're just rebuilding a clutch is any flashing that may be from wear on the edge of the clutch shoes. So what I like to do is take a file, and I'll actually chamfer the sides, which you can see the ProTek shoes already come pre-chamfered. So these ones you don't have to do. So that's something you just want to do. That way the clutch shoes don't actually like hang up, or whenever they're fully engaged, that way you're getting full contact of the shoe on the bell of the clutch, and you get the most amount of forward drive. All right, the clutch is fully assembled and on the engine, so it did take me a minute. I had to readjust my shimming on my clutch. So whenever you shim a clutch, there's a lot of videos on there and tutorials on how to do this, but the short of it is you want about a 0.5 millimeter of play. You don't want this to be totally cranked down, because the reality is, like metal, as it expands, it's going to cause bind in those bearings, which is not good. So you got to leave a little bit of space in there for expansion of the metals. So what you can do is just get one of these little shim kits from ProTek RC, has them, and here it is right here. It's got some 0.1 millimeter and 0.2 millimeter shims. So every time you service the clutch, it's not always, but a lot of times you're gonna have to re-shim it. So a lot of that has to do with, you know, how much end play you have in your crankshaft, for example, could change that, which... All right, next up is the air filter. So first things first, you know, you want to clean up the air filter before you do really anything to it. So I just wipe it down with a microfiber towel. Sometimes I'll use a little simple green on the towel if it's got any grossness on it, you know, nitro, oil, and residue, and all that kind of stuff. It is important to know that you don't get any kind of dirt or grossness inside of the boot of the air filter. So when you're doing this, just be really careful not to get anything inside of that boot. You know, just better off don't even touch that side of the boot. You're just trying to get some of the extra oil and dirt off this thing before I pull the air filter off, which I've done. So now we'll just go ahead and remove the air filter, and we'll go ahead and check it and, you know, see if our suspicion's right with how the dirt got in the engine. So we'll go ahead and remove our air filter and set that aside. So, okay, yep, I see where it came in. So I actually ran a longer main with this air filter, and it actually looks pretty good, but if you can see the inside of the air filter there, you can see little dark lines inside of that, and that's actually dirt that penetrated through the outer element into the inner element. You can actually see in here, if I peel it apart, where some of that dirt was. So it's just very minor in there, some discoloration, but that means that there was definitely something getting in there into the engine. So anyway, that's what you're looking for when you change an air filter. It's not necessarily, you know, how it looks on the outside, it's what it looks like on the inside of the air filter. So we're gonna go ahead and get a fresh one here from ProTek. And then what I'll do is, what's nice is they come individually wrapped. So you can just grab a couple air filters, throw them in the pit box before you go racing. You don't have to bring, you know, 50 air filters with you to the track. So what I like to do is grab a paper towel and just squish out some of that excess air filter oil. So it's just not possible to get all that dirt out of the inside. Like, it might look clean, but there could be microscopic dirt particles inside of that air filter. So it's best just to replace them. They're cheap. Engines are, you know, $450 to over $500. Just replace the air filter element and be safe. So anyway, I think this is ready to put back together. So we'll go ahead and slide that air filter element back on, and we'll put this thing together. All right, now we just go ahead and install the air filter with a zip tie on the engine. So if you don't have engine mounts that are 3-piece like these are J&Ts, then you're not going to want to zip tie and put on your air filter boot yet, because you need to check your throttle endpoint. Now in this case, I know that when I put this engine in, that I don't need to necessarily check my throttle endpoint, because the engine is indexed with these little pins on the bottom of the motor mount, and that ensures that the engine is perfectly aligned exactly how I had it last time, and I know my linkage doesn't need to be readjusted or endpoints or anything like that. All right, engine itself's done, so we're gonna go ahead and set this thing to the side, and we're gonna work on the tune pipe next. All right, so you can see my tune pipe here. This is a ProTek RC 2135 Samurai pipe. So, and it comes with the 80 millimeter header. I really like this pipe. It has good fuel mileage, as well as has a little bit more top end, and it's a little bit smoother on the low and mid range compared to the other ProTek pipes. So anyway, what we're gonna do, as I said before, we're gonna replace the gasket here, which I can see that the gasket's most likely bad. It just looks really nasty in there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these springs off, disassemble it, clean it up, replace the gasket, and then we're going to polish the pipe. So you can see we have our new gasket here, as well as the mother's mag and aluminum polish. I'm just going to go ahead and put this on a clean microfiber towel and clean up, because you know what? If you're in the pits, you might as well have your stuff looking good if you went to all this work to rebuild the engine. This takes only a couple minutes to do, and I just think it kind of finishes off the whole project. All right, you can see we got the pipe pretty much polished up. I mean, it doesn't look brand new, but it looks a lot better than it did. And while we're at it, we also replaced the exhaust gasket, which is, this thing is, it's almost like not even flexible anymore. It's so cooked. So anyway, definitely check these. I think this is often overlooked. So go ahead and replace these gaskets. Check them at least occasionally. So next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clean up the fuel tank. So what I like to do with the fuel tank is, well, first you want to make sure you plug all the holes like we did earlier. And then I just like to use Dawn dish soap and a toothbrush in the sink. And I cleaned off really well. I'm really careful that I'm not lifting the fuel tank lid because I don't want to get any water in there, obviously. When you're done, go ahead and blow it all off with compressed air to get all the remnant moisture and water off of it. And then just set it aside. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. All right, we got our fuel tank all cleaned up, looking nice, as you can see. So one of the things you want to look for in these is any kind of damage or cracks. You know, before you cleaned it, looking where the where all of the kind of grossness is in the tank. You know, if it's around a seam, for example, it's possible you could have a cracked tank. So how you can do the pressure test that is just stick a piece of fuel line on there, keep one cap sealed up in the top lid, and then just blow into the fuel line. And if you have any pressure loss in there, then you probably have a leak somewhere. So I've seen people do where they spray, you know, Dawn dish soap in water along the seams and then pressurize it. That works too. So that's something you definitely want to check, though. I would say probably after every single race day, just to be sure, because that can really mess with the tune of your engine. So we're going to go ahead and set this one aside for now. And next, we're going to get the new fuel line put on. So how often do you replace fuel line? I think that's entirely up to you. You know, one easy way to tell if your fuel pressure line is bad, which is the shorter one in this case, you'll see air bubbles come in there when you have a full tank of fuel. So that means that you probably have a leak somewhere along the line where the fuel line connects to the carburetor or to the fuel tank, and you'll want to replace that. The fuel pressure line, I can just tell by how easy does it go on and off the pressure line nipples. If it feels like it's going to come off easy, then odds are at full throttle, when that thing has a lot of pressure, you might end up blowing a pressure line off, which I've done before in the middle of a main. Not fun. So it's usually best to replace these before a big race. I mean, a club race, not a big deal. If it happens, you can just, you know, put a new one on the next time you hit the track. So anyway, what we're going to do is cut these to length and then put them on the engine, and then we're going to wrap things up. One thing I want to note, I always recommend you use the Flashpoint fuel line. It's just a little bit thicker walled, it's more durable, it's less prone to leaks, and honestly, it just lasts longer. So this is the best fuel line on the market, bar none. So if you need fuel line, you can get it from MeganRacing.com, and they have the Flashpoint RC brand fuel line. All right, I'm going to wrap things up here by kind of putting everything in storage. I'm not going to get to rebuilding the chassis of the Nitro buggy until tomorrow morning. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and cap off the fuel tank using the new fuel line, and I'll just connect it onto both nipples so that way it stays nice and sealed. And then for the tune pipe, I will go ahead and just pop off that back plate cover I had on there. And then we'll go ahead and slide the tune pipe on. We will connect the fuel line to the carb as well as on the tune pipe pressure nipple. And then we will secure the tune pipe with exhaust springs. Check your exhaust springs. If they're damaged, go ahead and replace them at this time. So that'll pretty much wrap it up. So we'll do a quick time lapse here, and then we'll close things out. And that is a wrap. You can see this engine, man, she's looking good. She's gonna perform awesome too. So check her out. Fully rebuilt for the next big race. All right, guys, thanks for watching Dirt Concepts and this episode where we rebuilt my ProTek RC RM.1 Nitro engine. We took a look at the fuel tank. We rebuilt the clutch as well as the air filter, and then we also cleaned up and rebuilt our expansion pipe, or tune pipe. So if you have any questions, you can drop a comment below. If you can, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.